Get ready for a roller coaster ride through the mob underworld, sprinkled with humor, charisma, and a dash of forget about it. It's the biography of Silvio Dante, a journey that's going to make you laugh, cry, and question why you never invested in a strip club. So without further ado, let's dive into the world of one of the most memorable characters in TV history. According to the Many Saints of Newark, old Silvio's pops was none other than Calogero Dante, a DeMeo soldier who met his untimely end sometime in '59. Now, Silvio's got that classic male pattern baldness thing going on. And let's be honest, he's been fighting that battle since he was rocking diapers. His hair? Well, surprise, surprise, it's a toupee. Before that, he was a proud owner of the world's most legendary comb-over. You see, Silvio's initial career path was to be the next Frank Sinatra. But I guess the world just wasn't ready for the greatness. Still, he kept one foot in showbiz through the years by owning more clubs in North Jersey than you can count, and being the go-to guy for aspiring starlets looking to make it big. Yeah, you could say Silvio had his finger in many showbiz pies. During his time rolling with Johnny Soprano's crew, Silvio made buddies with the one and only Salvatore Big Pussy Bonpensiero and Paulie Walnuts Gualtieri. He even played the role of Tony Soprano's early mentor. You could say he was like the wise, bald Yoda of the Soprano family. Now let's rewind to '67, where Silvio was already a big-shot mobster and a key player in the Soprano crew of the DeMeo crime family. That makes him a certified OG, at least a decade older than our main man, Tony Soprano. He even showed up at Janice Soprano's confirmation party, rubbing elbows with the likes of Pussy and Hollywood Dick Moltisanti. Oh, and don't forget, he was the guy you could find counting stacks of cash at Satriale's pork store. When he wasn't making money rain at the butcher shop, Silvio was the proud owner of Club Silhouette, where he and the crew would kick back, sip on some drinks, and probably debate the merits of the Sinatra versus Dean Martin feud. By '72, he'd solidified his spot in the Moltisanti crew, serving under Dickie Moltisanti in a role that was basically the consigliere and training gig for the big show he'd later put on with Tony. You see, when Harold McBrayer thought he could just waltz into Dickie's numbers racket, he had another thing coming. Silvio, Paulie, and Pussy decided it was time to pay a little visit to McBrayer's cousin Cyril's car shop. And let me tell you, that visit was about as friendly as a porcupine's hug. Paulie, always the charmer, decided to have a heart-to-heart with Cyril, using an impact drill as his conversation starter. But Cyril, in a surprising burst of adrenaline, broke free and went for Silvio like he was the last cannoli on the table. Silvio, not one to back down, gave him 3 good reasons to reconsider. And by reasons, I mean bullets. Now, when Dickie and Tony had their little falling out, guess who stepped in to play the wise old sage on Christmas? He's there, spouting praise for Tony like he's the second coming of Sinatra, saying Tony's gonna go places in this thing of ours. Of course, that pep talk lasted about as long as a snowflake in July because, wouldn't you know it, Dickie met his maker just minutes later in a hit ordered by none other than Junior Soprano. Talk about your classic family gatherings. Ralphie Cifaretto spilled the beans about Silvio's role in the early criminal careers of Tony, Ralph, and Jackie April. Apparently, Silvio was right there in the mix when they pulled off that daring robbery of Feech LaManna's card game. You know, the one that had everyone sweating bullets? Silvio was the mentor-in-chief, helping Tony slide into his father Johnny's crew like a well-oiled cannoli into a hungry mobster's mouth. But let's not forget Silvio's other talents. The man's Al Pacino impressions? Legendary. They were like a one-man show at every sit-down. And don't even get me started on his fashion sense. He dresses so sharp, he could cut a cigar with his cufflinks. Plus, the guy's got a brain for movies that's thicker than Vin Diesel's neck. So next time you need someone to shoot straight and make you laugh, Silvio's your guy. It was none other than our pal Silvio who dropped the bombshell on Tony about Uncle Junior's grand plan to whack Pussy Malanga right there in Artie Bucco's restaurant in '98. And let's not forget it was Silvio who got the honor of starting that little Vesuvio's bonfire, all in the name of saving the restaurant's reputation. Because really, who wants their veal parm tainted by the smell of burnt wood, am I right? Then came the short and not-so-sweet war of '99 with the Junior Soprano crew. Silvio was right there with Tony, and let's give the man his due. He stayed supportive when Tony spilled the beans about his therapy sessions. Not every mobster can say they've got a shrink on the speed dial. Now Silvio, he's like the Swiss Army knife of Tony's crew. While most of the guys turn into fire-breathing dragons at the drop of a cannoli, Silvio's the voice of reason. He's the guy who makes everyone sing Kumbaya before they bust out the baseball bats. He's Tony's go-to guy for sit-downs. where they talk it out over espresso instead of bullets. No wonder Tony relies on Silvio like he's the last cannoli in the box. When Silvio stepped up as consigliere after Tony became acting boss, it was like the perfect fit. He's the brains behind the operation, the guy who keeps the mob hits and poker games on schedule. But let's not forget, even Mr. Cool-Headed has his limits. One little remark from Fat Dom about Vito and Carlo, and Silvio turned into a hurricane of fists and fury. That ended up being Dom's last poker night, if you catch my drift. Silvio's got his fingers in all sorts of pies, loan sharking, bookmaking, and let's not forget his management roles at the Bada Bing. That place isn't just a strip joint. It's the mob's unofficial headquarters. And hey, sometimes it moonlights as a brothel, but we won't tell the health department about that. Now, here's the kicker. For a guy who spends half his life in strip clubs, Silvio's actually a doting dad. He calls his daughter Heather the Principessa, and when her soccer coach got a little too cozy with one of the players, Silvio was ready to serve up a dose of mob justice. But surprise, surprise, he played it by Tony's rulebook and let the authorities handle it. And believe it or not, the guy's got a soft spot for his wife Gabriella, despite his occasional wanderings. Love and loyalty, it's a complicated dance in this thing of ours. Silvio, the guy with a penchant for cleaning up the family messes, literally. It's like he's the designated traitor whisperer. You got Jimmy Altieri, who thought he could rat out the crew? Silvio sent him on a one-way ticket to sleep with the fishes back in '99. Then there's the infamous Big Pussy, who sang like a canary to the feds. Silvio, Tony, and Paulie sent him on a swim he wouldn't be coming back from in 2000. Adriana, poor Adriana, caught in the FBI snare, Silvio had to make sure she didn't spill any more beans, so he sent her on a one-way ride to the great strip club in the sky in 2004. And let's not forget Bert Hervasi, who decided to cozy up to the Lupertazzi family. Silvio showed him the ropes, literally, with a garret in 2007. In 2002, Silvio's judgment had a little hiccup. Tony was playing family favorites with Christopher Moltisanti, making him the go-between guy. Silvio, not too thrilled with that idea, decided to stir the pot by encouraging Patsy Parisi to help himself to some construction site goodies, despite Tony and Chris's orders. And then there was that whole Columbus Day showdown with Native American protesters. Tony saw it as a distraction, but Silvio was like a dog with a bone, refusing to let it go. Even when Tony had exhausted every avenue of winning that dispute, Silvio just couldn't take his foot off the gas. Tony noticed, but nothing came of it. Probably because he knew Silvio's loyalty was as solid as a cement shoe. So remember, when you need someone to handle family matters, Silvio's your guy. Just make sure you don't end up on his cleanup duty list. Sylvio and Paulie, now there's a duo for the ages. These two go way back, like spaghetti and meatballs. Silvio's always been aware of Paulie's tendency to hold onto his cash like it's glued to his hands, and his knack for finding trouble faster than a bloodhound on a scent. You know, Silvio's even told Tony that they both know Paulie's not exactly the king of tribute kicking. But that's just Paulie, a penny-pinching, danger-dodging maestro. When Paulie started straying toward the Lupertazzi crime family, Silvio tried to give him a little nudge in the right direction. They had their fair share of spats, especially when Paulie ended up in the Pine Barrens mess while doing Silvio's rounds. But like any good mob story, the dust eventually settled, and Paulie crawled back into Tony's good graces. Silvio's been Tony's rock through thick and thin, helping him navigate the treacherous waters of mob life. He's like the guy who reminds Tony not to shoot first and ask questions later. Because let's face it, Tony's got a hair trigger temper that makes a volcano look like a spa day. Then there was that time when Tony took a little vacation in the Coma Land, and Silvio had to step up as acting boss. At first, Silvio thought it was all gravy, even regretting not taking Jackie Aprile Sr.'s offer to become boss back in the 90s. But then reality slapped him like a brick to the face. The pressure, the hounding, the pestering, it was enough to make him wheeze like an asthmatic penguin. So, Silvio gladly handed the boss hat back to Tony like, "You can have this hot potato." Back in his comfortable consigliere role, Silvio kept doing what he does best, counseling Tony through all the drama. When Vito came out of the closet, so to speak, Silvio convinced Tony that giving him a pass would be like throwing a match into a gas tank. And when Tony was being a bit of a jerk after Bobby Bacala's injury, Silvio just had to give him the look to set him straight. Silvio always had a knack for finding himself in the middle of some hair-raising situations, didn't he? Like the time Vito Spatafor rolled back into town, fresh from his New Hampshire adventure. Silvio, always the voice of reason, mentioned that the popular sentiment was to kick Vito to the curb. But Tony, being Tony, decided to let Vito run a prostitution ring in Atlantic City. I guess you could say Tony had a thing for letting bygones be bygones as long as there was some money to be made. But then came Phil Leotardo, the wet blanket of the mob world, all hot and bothered about Vito being back in New Jersey. Silvio and Tony realized they couldn't keep bickering with Phil over this. It was like trying to win an argument with a brick wall. Not gonna happen. So they decided that if they wanted to keep their precious no-show jobs, Vito had to take a one-way trip to the afterlife. Silvio had been pushing for this all along and told Tony it was the right move and, hey, not to lose any sleep over it. And just like that, Carlo Gervasi was handed the unenviable task of taking care of Vito. Now, when Phil and his goons finally did the deed and offered Vito, without asking anyone for permission, mind you, Tony told Silvio it wasn't about Vito, it was about him. Silvio suggested they go after one of Phil's guys, but Tony was trying to keep things low-key. So instead of a war, they decided to blow up Phil's wire room in Sheepshead Bay, because nothing says, I mean business, like a good old-fashioned explosion. But the real fireworks happened at Satriali's pork store, where Fat Dom thought it was a brilliant idea to make jokes about Vito's love life and hint that Carlo might be hiding some secrets of his own. Silvio, usually the picture of calm, lost it and went full-on vacuum cleaner attack mode. He smashed his handheld vacuum over Dom's noggin and held him tight while Carlo did the dirty deed. Tony swung by the shop later, but Silvio tried to keep him away. Of course, Tony being Tony, he had to see what all the fuss was about. Then there was the lunch date with Jerry Torchiano, where an assassin decided to make a surprise appearance and ruin everyone's appetite. Tony, always the concerned boss, worried that Silvio might have gotten caught in the crossfire. It's like they say, mob lunches are always so unpredictable. But Silvio's bad luck didn't end there. Bert Gervasi, the rebellious one, tried to rope Silvio into a coup against Tony. Silvio's response? Well, he showed Bert the ropes, literally, by strangling him at home. No coup for you! And then came the assassination plots, one after another. First, Bobby took a bullet. Then, Silvio and Patsy Parisi had a close encounter with a pair of trigger-happy foes outside the Bada Bing. Bullets were flying, and Silvio was playing hide-and-seek with his pistol in the back seat like it was a game of finders keepers. He managed to grab it in the nick of time, but not without taking a bullet or two himself. Patsy did his best to hold them off, but they had it out for Silvio. He got shot in the chest, and Patsy ran for the hills. So off to the hospital Silvio went, and it wasn't for a tonsillectomy. Paulie Gualtieri, the bearer of bad news, informed Tony that Silvio survived the hit, but was in a coma. The doctors didn't seem too optimistic about him waking up, and, well, let's just say it's not the kind of sleep you set an alarm for. Tony paid him a visit, held his hand for a bit, and gave him the silent treatment. The doctors might have had their doubts, but one thing's for sure. Silvio's adventures in the mob were far from a snooze fest. Rest in peace, buddy, or at least in peaceful mobster slumber. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to Vano VHS and hit the like button.